All right, I think it's time to get started. Um, I'm delighted to be here with my colleagues from Harvard and from China to celebrate one of the really great sort of people who have had an association with the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University. And as you will see, we're going to learn a lot about Hu, one of the most important botanists of the 20th century in China and in the world today in this celebration of his life and also of his distinguished scholarship as well as institution building in China in the 20th century. First, I would like to say that there are a couple of things that we're going to do technically on this side. For those of you who would prefer to hear the program in Mandarin, this is not a problem. We are offering simultaneous interpretation for this program from Chinese to English. And for those of you who would prefer to listen to the program in English, for those speakers who are going to be giving their presentations in Chinese, we have the technology now to go from English to Chinese and Chinese to English. You will need to go to the bottom of your Zoom link, and there you will see a symbol of a globe. And if you don't see that, as is the case with mine, you will see something that says more with three dots. What you will want to do is you'll want to select the language that you wish to hear. You can also select mute original audio if you want to hear the original speaker to be completely muted. Otherwise, you will hear them at a lower volume in the background. And Jin Chuang, my old friend and dearest friend, could you please give those communications in Chinese?
？Shall the interpreter use the Chinese to say the instructions, or just we will continue?
Just the instructions in Chinese, if you could. That way, we want everyone to be comfortable with their first language and to be able to relax and enjoy that. So, Jin Chuang, if you could just let people know about the Zoom button at the bottom.
I think Xinshuang has some internet issues.
Thank you.
You cannot hear me? Sorry.
Oh, okay, good. Oh.
You heard? I just finished my basic translation.
We didn't hear you.
Really? Oh my God, let me see. How about now?
Right now it's good.
OK，那我就再说一遍。各位中文听众，晚上好。你打开 Zoom 的有传译那个小地球商标，打开之后有中文和英文的翻译。这次活动哈佛大学提供了双语。也可以呢把那个原始的音频呢，关闭，然后只选择其中一种，中文和英文。有什么问题吗？现在，小江，能听到吗？
Thank you, Jin Chuang.
Yes.
So today's program will have a limited number of speakers, but it is important to know that many people and institutions beyond the select group this morning and this evening have actually participated in this celebration of Dr. Hu's life. I'd like to acknowledge these people and institutions who have kindly recorded video speeches on behalf of their universities or institutes and who will be joining us personally in the audience. First, I'd like to acknowledge Professor Fu Zhuiyang, Professor of Literature, former president of Jiangxi Normal University, Professor Cheng Yigong, Professor of Biological Science, President of Nanchang University, Professor Yin Yafang, Vice Director, Research Institute of Wood Industry, Chinese Academy of Forestry. In addition, the following institutes produced video presentations for our event. The faculty, students, staff of these institutes are also with us in the audience. Lushan Botanical Garden, Chinese Academy of Sciences. Kunming Institute of Botany, Chinese Academy of Sciences. Jiangxi Agricultural University, and Jingdushan National Reserve, where the wonderful Metasequoias reside. Thank you, all of you, for your additional work and participation in this wonderful celebration of Dr. Hu's life. Now, what I'd like to do is introduce Professor Mark Elliott. Mark Elliott is the Vice Provost of International Affairs at Harvard University and the Mark Schwartz Professor of Chinese and Inter-Asian History in the Department of East Asian Languages and Civilizations and in the Department of History in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. As Vice Provost, Professor Elliott oversees and advances Harvard's global work. As a scholar, Professor Elliott is a leading authority on the last 4 centuries of Chinese history with an emphasis on the Qing period. He is the author of several books and numerous scholarly articles and was previously the director of Harvard's Fairbank Center for Chinese Studies. We are so pleased that you can join us today for this important event.
Thank you, Ned. And good morning, everybody, or good evening, depending on where you are. I want to start by saying a few things in Chinese, and then I'll switch to English so that the interpreters have a little warning here. So
I would like to invite everybody to join us for this event to celebrate his great outstanding contribution to this field and also the exchange opportunity activities between Harvard University and China. I have acting as the Vice Provost of Harvard University.
So as Ned said, I serve as the Vice Provost for International Affairs at Harvard, which is a position that I've held for some time now, and it's a real pleasure and honor for me to be here this morning to welcome everybody. I'm only going to speak very briefly to say how important this event is for the university to mark the contributions of Professor Hu to the field of botany and to the long history of academic engagement between Harvard and China, which we will hear about shortly, much more from my colleague Bill Kirby at the Department of History. We're especially pleased by the guests who have joined us today, and I want to give a special shout out to Professor Hu Xiaojiang of Beishida, who is a Harvard PhD, and of course today, most importantly, the granddaughter of Professor Hu Hsen-Hsu, and we'll hear from her again just in a little bit. Particularly a time when relations between our two governments are still tense, the importance and significance of maintaining academic ties between Harvard and scholars, universities, and research institutes in China emerges even more clearly. So it's a special pleasure to join with everybody this morning. Most of you, if you're here, you already know a little bit about Hu Hsen-Hsu, who is recognized widely as the father of the field of botany in China. He started his studies at UC Berkeley and then later came to Harvard to do his doctoral work under the direction of John Jack, who was based at the Arnold Arboretum at the time. And that was a lifelong relationship that the two of them maintained. He returned to China after completing his doctoral work, and as Ned alluded to in a little while ago, founded or helped to lead a very large number of China's most important botanical institutions. And again, we'll hear much more about Professor Hu's distinguished career in just a minute. Perhaps the most famous contribution for which he is known is the discovery of the Metasequoia, a specimen of which graces the beautiful grounds of the Arnold Arboretum. The Metasequoia glyptostroboides, or dawn redwood, or if we prefer in Chinese, by the very simple name shui sha. This tree, which had been thought to have been extinct, he rediscovered. He sent those seeds to the Arboretum in 1948. Very good timing on his part. And these trees now stand as the logo, in fact, of the Arboretum, an enduring symbol of natural beauty, of scientific discovery, and international cooperation. You'll hear from the speakers today the way that this legacy of cooperation and collaboration between the Arnold Arboretum and partners in China has continued ever since. In fact, I will say that just yesterday afternoon, I was meeting in my office with one of my PhD students in the history of science who is preparing to go to China next year to do research on the history of botany, the emergence of botany as a field of knowledge in China, based on its late imperial origins and tracing it through to the 20th century. And when I mentioned today's event to her, she got very excited because she knew all about Hu Hsen-Hsu. In fact, she's going to be doing some of her work at the Kunming Institute of Botany next year. So this legacy of Professor Hu's is very much alive today, not just in the Arnold Arboretum, though that's where its most impressive legacy probably lies, but as well here on the campus, where his scholarly contributions remain an object of great serious study for many people. I'll end just by noting one connection that may not be quite as well known between Hu Hsen-Hsu and Harvard, and that's one that runs through his good friend, also surnamed Hu, and that's Hu Shi, one of the great scholars of Chinese 20th century, ambassador to the United States at one point, and a recipient of a Harvard honorary degree. Both of the Hus, Hu Shi and Hu Hsen-Hsu, were immersed in the scientific world of the West and studied in the United States. Hu at Cornell and Hu Hsen-Hsu, Hu Shi at Cornell and Hu Hsen-Hsu at Harvard. They had different positions when it came to their critique of traditional, quote unquote, Chinese culture, and stood on different sides of the issue during the May 4th era, which formed them both. But they were good friends, and they both left a lasting mark on the Harvard campus. Hu Hsen-Hsu in the form of the great trees that I've already talked about, and Hu Shi in the words carved on a large stele, marking a gift from the Harvard alumni to the university on the 300th anniversary of the founding of Harvard back in 1936. This stele, this shibei, stands right on the side of Widener Library. If you've been to Harvard Yard, you'll certainly see it. So we have representatives of both of these great men, both Hus, who were themselves good friends, marking the great importance between Harvard's academic engagement, Harvard's engagement with China, that goes back well over a century. And with that, I want to again welcome everybody. You're in for a very interesting morning, and like you, I'm very excited to learn more about the terrific career and the really long-lasting contributions made by Professor Hu Hsen-Hsu. Thank you. 谢谢各位.
Thank you, Mark. So glad that you could be here with us on this important day. And now I'd like to introduce Professor William Kirby, Bill Kirby. He is the T.M. Chang Professor of China Studies at Harvard University and Spangler Family Professor of Business Administration at the Harvard Business School. He's a University Distinguished Service Professor and serves as the chairman of the Harvard China Fund, which is one of the funds that really promotes all kinds of wonderful interactions between Harvard and China. I could go on and on. He's a historian of modern China, interested in contemporary China's business, economic, and political development, and he writes and teaches on the growth of modern companies in China. But most importantly today, although this is very strict, we've limited him to only 10 minutes when in fact this could be a full 2 hours to talk about the history of Harvard and China.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ned. And Hu Hsen-Hsu, 大家好. It's wonderful to be with you, and I'm very grateful to Ned and to the Arboretum for this invitation and for Dr. to celebrate the extraordinary life and contributions of Dr. Hu and the connections between Harvard and China in the realm of botany. Let me just take a step backward and look at the broader relationship between Harvard and China over time. And let me share my screen if I can. If you can see, let me start this show. And please let me know if you cannot see. But if you can, I shall continue. Ours is more than a century of engagement. In fact, you could think it, Harvard, these two individuals actually didn't know each other. This is a gentleman that is thought to, is at least an image of our founder, John Harvard. This is the Chongzhen Emperor of the Ming Dynasty. They were contemporaries, but actually never met. But it's important to note that Harvard was founded in the late Ming Dynasty, although nobody at Harvard knew that. Our history, the Ming's history, would therefore be short, thereafter be rather short, but Harvard's is nearly now 400 years old. But our intersection really begins in the 19th century in a significant way in the global trade of which this Boston area was so central. The trade that these two gentlemen engaged in, this is Ho Kwa, the Cantonese merchant, the richest man in the world in all likelihood in around 1840. And this is Augustine Hurd, Harvard graduate from Ipswich, Massachusetts, who engaged in, as many in the Boston area did, in the very lucrative China trade of that era. The first serious encounters in business terms based in the Canton factories, and a trade rooted, among other things, in the American addiction to tea. An addiction to tea, although not an addiction to paying taxes on tea, which has something to do with the origins of the American Revolution. But the relationship educationally between Harvard and China really does not begin until the 1870s and 1880s, when our president, Charles Eliot, invites Mr. Ge Kunhua to come and teach Chinese here at Harvard. Ge Kunhua was a gentleman from Ningbo, and not quite clear what kind of Chinese he taught to Harvard undergraduates at that moment in time. But a life cut tragically short, dying of pneumonia in a Boston winter only 3 years after his appointment. But many other connections with China would continue. This is the director of the Fogg Art Museum, today known as the Harvard Art Museums, Langdon Warner, who, among others, took expeditions out to Western China and borrowed several things from Dunhuang. He actually stole them from Dunhuang, or took them from Dunhuang, and they're in the Harvard Art Museum. Happily, we now have an extraordinarily positive relationship with Dunhuang. But our art collection, of course, is rooted also in a long history of collection from China. More important is the long history of Chinese students in this university. The Harvard China Club, the Chinese Club, was formed in 1908 with a very small number of individuals, but a continuous number of students from China from the turn of the previous century right up to the extraordinary number of Chinese students we are honored to host at Harvard today. We had a medical school in Shanghai in the 19-teens, and we had extraordinarily close relations with this institution, the Tsinghua University, initially funded by American returned Boxer indemnity funds. And to just give you one example of the kind of circularity of talent between Harvard and China, this gentleman here was a Tsinghua professor, a Boxer indemnity student named Jiang Tingfu, studied at Oberlin and at Columbia, became chair of the history department at Tsinghua. And he was the teacher of my teacher, John Fairbank, who learned his Chinese and his Chinese history at Tsinghua University in the 1930s. We have a long and very distinguished lineage of connections between Harvard and China. And one thing Fairbank once told me when I was a graduate student, that one of his biggest regrets in life was the cutting off of academic relations between Harvard and China, between the United States and China after 1950 for more than 20 years. And we, Professor Elliott, myself, and our colleagues, we are determined that this should never happen again. It is through this gate, in the 1936, on the date of our tercentenary, that, as Dr. Elliott just mentioned to Professor Hu Shi, as the representative of Peking University, came to Harvard for our 300th anniversary as the Beijing University Beida's representative, and dedicated this stele, which you can read and see right outside our great library, Widener Library. It's a stele that talks about why culture is the foundation of a nation, but learning is what makes nations great, and how China and the United States and Chinese and American students must learn one from another. Today, we have a great multiplicity of different parts of the university that are active in China. Our Fairbanks Center of Chinese Studies, the Harvard China Fund, which supports students and faculty in their engagement in China itself, our student-led groups of the Harvard China Forum, our online course, which you can all see, 免费, on our interpretation of 5,000 years of Chinese history, and our Harvard Center Shanghai, which is our embassy in China. This is our Harvard Center in Shanghai. We unfortunately don't have the whole building, but we do have a very active floor in it. We're also known for many other things. Our name is reasonably well known in China. We even have an automobile called the Hafo, a best-selling car, once upon a time, an SUV that is not selling so well these days, I must say, despite its name, because it's not an electric vehicle, and electric vehicles sell better than anything else in China. So it's now being exported in large numbers to Russia, to my chagrin. Harvard vehicles across the steppes of Eurasia and Russia. But our longest continuous relationship is this one, with the Arnold Arboretum, beginning in 1907 with this expedition led by E.O. Wilson for 3 years. And there are extraordinary numbers of documents about this at the Arboretum. And of course, in particular, our capacity and honor to host the soon-to-be Dr. who arrived in the United States in 1913, who studied at the greatest public university in the United States, the University of California at Berkeley, and who then came here for his doctoral degree, where, and this is a picture that it's not quite clear where it was taken, but it could well have been taken here in Boston. But in any event, this was during his time as a doctoral student, meeting with Hu Shi in 1925. This is his dissertation, as you know, a comprehensive survey of the plants of all of China. And he did something that's actually quite unusual. As far as I know, this is his Doktorvater, John George Jack. He named a species, a genus, actually, Cynojackia, after his doctoral father. I don't know, Professor Elliott, if anyone has named a species, any of your students has named a species after you, but no one has yet done that for me. He would go on, as you know, to establish the Lushan Forest Botanical Garden, Lushan being a beautiful place and a favorite place both of Jiang Jieshi and of Mao Zedong as a political gathering spot. And then famously, the founding in the 1940s, this Metasequoia, two new versions of which now grace the courtyard of our new engineering complex in Alston, right across from the Harvard Business School. And one beautiful version of which I visited very recently at the Botanical Garden of UC Berkeley, now shedding its leaves in the autumn weather. He's a man of extraordinary talent, of correspondence in English and in Chinese, and would live out his life in most difficult times in the first decades of the People's Republic. But we at Harvard are honored by the memory of his study here and are honored by the central role that he had in the long history of Harvard's cooperation with China, led in very considerable measure by the Arnold Arboretum. Thank you all very much, and I shall stop here.
Thank you so much, Bill. It's wonderful to see those incredible photographs and images of Professor Hu as a very young person about to launch his career. And I hope they will remind all of the young people who are watching today and in recordings about what it means to launch a career that has meaning and impact in the world. Our next part of the program is really going to focus specifically on the life of Professor Hu. And I've asked two people to speak to this life, this incredibly rich life, complicated, impactful, in so many ways, a life that continues to reverberate in the world. The first of the two speakers is Ma Jinchuang, who is a colleague and a dear friend who is at the Beijing Botanical Garden, the National Botanical Garden in China, a great scholar, a great botanist, someone who I find remarkable in so many ways for the passion he brings to his love of plants and their diversity, their evolution, and really has done so much to promote botanical knowledge in China today and over many decades. And Hu Zhaozhang, who is the granddaughter of Professor Hu, herself a professor at Beijing Normal University, someone who received her PhD here at Harvard University, following in the footsteps of her grandfather, and a wonderful person who will speak in very personal terms to her own quest to understand and learn and fully expose the incredible life of her grandfather. So I will turn it over to the two of you to help us in our journey to celebrate the life of Professor Hu.
Thank you, Ned. My speak will be in Chinese.
大家如果要听中文，现在听中文的话呢，可能就要转到主频道去听啊。那么，thank you very much for attending this event. Dr. Hu was born in Xinjiang, Jiangxi in 1894. And he received his bachelor's degree and master's degree, as well as doctoral degree in U.S. This is a photo in 1912. He decided to come to U.S. to receive education, and that was the photo taken in UC Berkeley. And these are the dissertations by Dr. Hu, which is kept in the library of Harvard University. This is the Dr. Zhang Jack. I want to give an introduction about the Dr. Hu in the following aspects. So first of all, he made an outstanding contribution to the university's teaching and training the talents for the Chinese botany. So he acted as a professor in the universities and colleges listed on this slide. And he also published numerous works, and the students he taught became outstanding representatives in this field, and their names are also listed on this slide. The next aspect is that he established institutions and academic journals and opened a new era in the Chinese botanical fields. So the institutions and the journals he established are also listed on this slide. So starting from 1922 to 1938, we can see that he established various institutions for the research and study in this area, including the Chinese botanical publications. And the third aspect is his large-scale collections, including his collection of the seeds, plants nationwide. He mentored and assisted a lot of talents. The three gentlemen shown on that slide are the outstanding representatives. And the other one I would like to talk about, it was in the early 1930s. He received $3,000 from US to support his efforts in this field. So people can imagine to picture how invaluable $3,000 was in those days. It made an outstanding contribution in the development of this field in China. And then from 1920s to 1940s, Dr. Hu also extensively contacted with all the important botanical organizations in the world. So he reached out to a lot of directors, authorities outside China to get their support to help the development of the botany in China and his efforts in this area in China. So all his efforts has had extensive influence not only in China but also in the international community. So he had various works, books published, also translated into other languages. So the books he published, he authored and published are listed in on this slide. And so in 1950s, he published the Handbook of Economic Plants, the forage plants of China. And also just before the Chinese Revolution, he completed the great work, which is the major groups of living beings, a new classification. So throughout his life, Dr. Hu published close to 126 writings. And another aspect is his correspondence internationally and also nationally. So, which included the foreign correspondence, 782 letters, and also 387 Chinese language letters. And we have some his handwritten letters with his advising professor, Dr. Zhang Jack. And all these correspondences between him and his recipients played a profound role in the study of the history in this field. In his letters, this Metasequoia is a live fossil, and then Dr. Hu he called for the National Botanical Garden to be established in China. And it was not the first time for him to call for the establishment of such a national botanical garden. And it was in a very difficult times after the war time that China went through. These are some seals, and this one was also actually coined by him. And once it was taken by somebody to Japan, and at some time it was successfully retrieved back to China. And this is the biological research institutions in China. And he created a Lushan Arboretum in China. These are the Chinese Journal of Botany. This is the first issue of the first volume, which was established, initiated by him. And this is the discovering of living fossil, Metasequoia. Usually people know that the Metasequoia was discovered in 1960s, but actually it was in 1940s. And this is the living fossil tree, the first tree which was discovered, it is still living in a place in China. And this is the Dr. Hu's photo in front of the Metasequoia. And the image of the on the right is the last works published by Dr. Hu in his life. This is the Metasequoia sun, and it is in the garden of the Metasequoia in North China. These photos also are the records of Dr. Hu's engagement in the academical circles, spheres. And this is the Lushan Botanical Garden, where it becomes an internal remembrance home for Dr. Hu. And this also, from there, more arboretums were established in China. In 2023, to commemorate Dr. Xiansu-Hu's contribution, we started to compile and publish the complete works by Dr. Xiansu-Hu. And it is a photo we took in 2023 at the time when the compiled Dr. Hu's works were published. And we also had his works published in some other journals in China. And so these are some representative magazines which had the published works by Dr. Hu. So this is the first issue in this magazine, which was published in 2025, this year. So after up to almost 100 years efforts by generations of pioneers, now the Chinese botany has evolved greatly. So we have all these publications available, and some of them are linked to the website of Harvard University. So among all these publications, a lot of them are translated into English and published, and some scholars who participated in the writing of these articles, they had the opportunities to be extensively engaged in their endeavors in China. They have also paid visits to China. So we have contained more than 35,000 taxa of for the plants in these published works. These are the English version of Flora of China. So now we have more than 34 local floras, about 34 provinces which have participated in the Chinese flora. 在about 25 years ago and more than 30 years after the passing of Dr. Hu, we have some other publications of his works. So today we gather together here to review history. We are commemorating our predecessors to broaden our horizons, as well as inspiring our future generations. This is our goal, and this is the significance of the event. Hereby, I would like to extend our sincere graduation to Harvard University and also the team who have done great work to organize, to host this event. I want to thank Ned and also Harvard University OEB's professors, faculty, and also I'm honored to be invited to share my opinions to present at this meeting. So I have been engaged in the efforts in a lot of libraries, museums. I have worked in the arboretums, which have extensive connection with the Arnold Arboretum in Harvard University. I also have a lot of engagement in the Arboretum, the botanical study in Berkeley University in California. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jin Shuang. So thank you so much for this history. And of course, I want to applaud you for over 20 years of your scholarship on essentially sharing the life of Professor Hu with the world. It has been so important, your scholarship in this area, and of course, the many volumes that are now appearing that cover far more than just his botanical contributions. And now I'd like to introduce Professor Hu Hsen-Hsu, who will speak to us about other aspects of the life, in this case, of her grandfather.
Dear friends, today my topic is about Hu Xiaoshu's era and life, which is quite broad. So aligning with today's theme, in the following 15 minutes, I would like to focus on 3 aspects. I have difficulty turning our slide. Okay, it's okay. So Dr. Hu's era in the beginning of the 20th century, which had a lot of turmoils, including political aspects, technical development, and as the first generation scientist, he's outstanding compared with other scientists is that he is outstanding both in arts and sciences, especially his ties with the Harvard University, particularly the Arnold Arboretum. I would like to talk about Hu Hsen-Hsu's connection with Harvard, which started before he went to Harvard to study. So these are the fields in which he had his contributions of research and study. Hu Hsen-Hsu was born into a traditional Chinese gentry family. His ancestors for 4 generations followed a path of studying, taking the imperial examinations, becoming officials, and finally retiring into seclusion. He was talented when he was little. He started immersing himself in traditional literature from a young age. He later recorded studying the articles, and once he recorded that when he read, Yuzi said, a person should be filial piety and brotherly affection, which will have a new broad world in terms of mentally and spiritually. So Xiansu Hu, when he was very young, he had deeper understanding of these aspects, which also established the foundations of his moral beliefs in traditional Chinese culture. In 1921, the Professor Babbitt, he published a poem in English, and Dr. Hu found he agreed a lot with Dr. Babbitt's thoughts and research theories. And these are the Dr. Dewey, who is a role model of the new time thinkers. So Dr. Xiansu Hu, he was passionate to introduce Dr. Babbitt's thoughts into China. Babbitt is a very common surname, which will be translated into 巴比特 in Chinese. However, since Xiansu Hu in 1921, only one such a Professor Babbitt's surname is translated into Chinese as Bai Bi De. So by selecting these Chinese characters, Bai Bi De, for the translation of Dr. Babbitt's Chinese translation, it represents impeccable moral integrity like a white jade. So he compared the Dr. Babbitt's humanism and how to translate it. This term into Chinese, he translated it into Zheng Wanjun, humanism in Chinese. A lot of people are familiar with the Chinese term Zheng Wanjun, humanism, but they didn't know the selection of the Chinese characters for humanism in Chinese was the work by Dr. Xiansu Hu. So Dr. Xiansu Hu believes this is very consistent with the traditional value of the Chinese culture. So he believes an individual should be have the virtues and characters of being moderate, humble, self-discipline. And so in the Chinese academic field, there are a lot of extensive studies in this field. So I think I will not have time to elaborate in this topic. So when you hear the humanic care, then if you feel loving and warm in your heart, then you should know that this word selecting was done by Dr. Hu. Being a botanist, Dr. Hu knows that in the past, people didn't believe people have the natural the feeling, and so he also thinks that all the moral connections should be like an invaluable treasure among the humans. So people, but even though he had extraordinary achievements in his endeavors, but his childhood was kind of miserable. His father passed away when he was 8. When his mother passed away when he was 20 years old. Because he was far away in the US for education, he was not able to go back to participate the funeral of his mother. So after a long time, when he returned to his hometown, he wrote a poem like a long time traveler returning to his hometown, a motherless son. So he, in his studying in the Harvard University, he started to have the father-son like affection between him and Professor John Jack. So earlier, Dr. Jinshuang Ma also talked about Dr. Hu maintained a very consistent and frequent correspondence with other scholars in the Harvard University. All that we talked about in their correspondence were about their researches, studies, and their efforts in the botanical field. So in his lifetime, Dr. John Jack acted as a father figure in his life. So in 1925, he said, I really hope I can live up to your expectation to me. I hope a few years later, I will be able to write a book about the floras in China. This is my goal, a goal I dearly hold in my heart. In 1913, so he this is a 4-page handwritten letter which Dr. Hu wrote. At that time, he was 37 years old. At that time, everybody back then surrounding him was other people wanted to depend on him, but he had nobody for him to depend on. And so at that time, he was sick, and he fell asleep. In his dream, he dreamed of Dr. Jack John, and he believed that was the implication showing Dr. John Jack was always there to support him. So he wanted to tell Dr. John Jack, saying, even though I never said this in front of you in person, but you have always been a father figure to me. So we know, and even though we were not able to contain such a letter, but we believe he always had Dr. John Jack as a role model, and his long time and extensive connection with Harvard University. It was not just because of the scientific research and study work. In addition, and more profoundly, it was because of the ties and affection, feeling like a father and a son between himself and Dr. John Jack. And he's emphasized and he valued the family ties and noble morals, and so these are all the virtues cherished both in China and in the international world. So in 1920s, in the new cultural movement. So there were some clashes between different principles and philosophies. What he selected was so pure, so noble, which was drawn by clamors in the society back in those days. The main leading figures in the academic world, they all defended and maintained their jade-like characters. So back in the war time, in the older days in China, none of his group defected their noble traditional values and characters. So during his first half of his scientific endeavors, he was his life was quite smooth. However, in the rest part of his life, he endured a lot of pressure and struggles. I think back then, in his book, he criticized Lysenko, and I think when he was in face of the tremendous political pressure, as long as he took an easier way, which was if he had done as other people recommended him, just to declare a self criticism and to bend to the pressures, then your life would be much easier. But he said, I did nothing wrong. What shall I apologize for? So I believe when he made his choice, he believed his parental generation role models showed him all the spirits and disciplines. The days of Dr. Hu has passed away. So it has been more than 70 years since 1950s. Now a lot of people in this field might not have such extensive understanding what he experienced. But now more and more people started to be aware of and cherish his moral courage. Today, we have so many people gathering together to share Dr. Xiansu-Hu's stories. I think a lot of people are moved by his efforts, his spirits, and I want to extend our acknowledgement to our co-workers, colleagues who participated in the joint efforts to promote the academic spirit. These are the consultants and teachers participated in our efforts. Now I would like to extend my special thanks to Dr. Hu Xiu-Xian and Dr. Chen Ye Huang, who are also among us in the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Hu. That was a wonderful recounting of so many of the important parts of your grandfather's life. We're now going to turn to a short but wonderful part of what perhaps certainly in the United States is sort of one of the most important parts of Dr. Hu's life, and that is his association with the scientific discovery of the dawn redwood from China. And I turn now to Lisa Pearson, who is the head of the library and the archives of the Arnold Arboretum, someone who is deeply immersed in taking care of all of our incredible records of over a century of our interactions with the botanists and the plants of China.
Thank you very much, Ned. I appreciate this chance to speak. Let me share my screen. There we are. Hang on a moment here, sorry. There we are. All right. So we're all very familiar with the magnificent dawn redwood, the Metasequoia glyptostroboides, and Hu Hsen-Hsu's part in bringing it to the world. But it can also tell an inspiring story of collaboration between scientists and do that through their correspondence. I want to thank Dr. Ma Jingshuang for the invaluable work in publishing Hu's writings. Really, I could not have done this without having those for my remarks. So, as we know, ancient Metasequoia grew over the Northern Hemisphere during the late Cretaceous period, about 100 million years ago, down through the Miocene epoch, which was 5 million years ago, and then it vanished from the fossil record. The fossils were published as a new genus, the genus called Metasequoia, by the Japanese paleobotanist Miki Shigeru in 1941. Hu Hsen-Hsu had Miki's paper, as well as a 1928 paper by S. Endo entitled A New Paleogene Species of Sequoia, in which Endo described a new fossil species, which he called Sequoia chinensis. Endo wrote further on Sequoia chinensis in 1933. And when he was comparing the descriptions and the plates of the articles, Hu noted the striking similarities of the specimens described in all three papers. And in a 1946 article, he proposed changing the name Sequoia chinensis to Metasequoia chinensis for the ancient trees. Now, Chinese forest scientists were conducting extensive field work during the 1930s, 1940s, and they collected specimens throughout the country to identify indigenous species and use them to create national forest surveys, as well as identify resources for the ancient trees. There's the ancient Metasequoia posed beside a modern piece of leaves that have just turned here. We have lovely color right now in Boston. A tree that seemed interesting and seemed new had been spotted in the early 1940s, and finally specimens were gathered for that, and they made their way to Professor Zheng Wanjun, who we see in the center of this photo in white, standing beside a trunk of Metasequoia. Zheng's curiosity was piqued. To him, the sample was clearly not glyptostrobus, but he needed more plant material, and which he set out to get. He had people collect for him. And then he got that, and he sent it to Hu Hsen-Hsu for identification. Now, it was Hu's detailed knowledge of Metasequoia from the fossil record that was no doubt critical for him to do the connect the dots, to link the ancient trees with the specimens which had been recently collected. In 1948, Hu and Cheng published their article describing the Du tree in the Bulletin of the Fan Memorial Institute of Biology. But stepping back several years to the spring of 1946, Hu had written to Elmer Drew Merrill, who was the director of the Arnold Arboretum, to tell him about the newly recognized tree. Merrill and Hu had had a long relationship dating back to the early 1920s, when Merrill, who was then with the United States Department of Agriculture in the Philippines, did determinations of plants for his colleagues in China. It grew over the decades. When Merrill came to Harvard University in 1935, he very soon wrote Hu about continuing exchanges of plant material and publications, which was practice that he had conducted previously with Hu when Merrill was at the University of California and at the New York Botanical Garden. In a letter soon after, Merrill tells Hu that he had authorized a bank draft of $500, $500 in 1935, which was equivalent in buying power at that time to about $12,000 today. And he provided that to subsidize collections in Yunnan in the following year. Those subsidies continued until 1940, when the war had caused huge upheaval, of course, and made communication very difficult. However, they did resume in 1946. Hu's April 20th letter in 1946 to Merrill discussed losses at the Fan Institute and the huge task of rebuilding the Lushan Botanical Garden after the destruction in the war. But it contained some exciting news. And I quote, "Have you received a communication from Dr. Wan Chun Cheng announcing the discovery of a new genus of Cupressaceae, which consists of a monotropic, gigantic deciduous tree found around Wanshan in Sichuan? What a wonderful discovery it is. Only 3 lofty trees of 34 meters are living. Casually, I also found a few small trees of Glyptostroboides pensilius in the backyards of a small village about 40 miles from Nanchang. So this proves conclusively that this conifer can easily be planted in the 6th zone in the States. When we have collected seeds from these trees, I shall send some to you. I hope this tree will be more widely planted in the States." End quote. I'll add here that Zone 6 is in the zones is that of Boston. We are Zone 6B. By late in the year, Hu had seen a complete specimen of Metasequoia, and he describes it in a December 2nd letter to Merrill as, quote, "really a striking tree," and promises to send seed the next year to the Arnold for distribution. Merrill responded several weeks later saying, and I quote, "This is really good news regarding the Metasequoia. As I told you when you first announced the find, we would eventually like to have specimens, and if possible, seeds also," end quote. In Hu's May 3rd, 1947 letter to Merrill, he closed his paper on the Paleogene species in Metasequoia and asked for funding to collect seeds later that year. Merrill quickly responded, promising $500 for the dual purpose of collecting seeds and also sending botanical material that had been stored during the war while shipping was impossible. In his letter, Merrill takes up the topic of the specific name viva that Cheng and Hu had been using for the living tree. They had been calling it Metasequoia viva as opposed to Glyptostroboides. Merrill said that in discussions with the Arnold Arboretum taxonomist Alfred Rader, that is Alfred Rader, who had worked so closely with Ernest Wilson to name his species from China in the earlier 20th century, that both men, Rader and Merrill, felt that viva was too ambiguous and should not be used. Merrill mentions that Zheng hope to participate in the Metasequoia fieldwork and offers to send an additional $500 should Hu feel that it was advisable. Hu agreed, and he told Merrill in a June 4th letter that he would use the money for seed collections and also to send the stored specimens by air, the most reliable form of transport, to the American Embassy in Nanjing for shipment to the United States. And Hu adds, concerning the name Metasequoia, Dr. Cheng first proposed the specific name Glyptostroboides, that is a mouthful, which seems very good to me. So he agreed with that, and I end quote. The funding soon arrived, paving the way for seed collections in the Metasequoia Valley. In his 29th of September letter, Hu responds that seed production was lean that year, but an additional stand of Metasequoia was found nearby. He says, and I quote, "It will take another month for the fruits to ripen. When the seeds have been collected, I shall send them by air if possible," end quote. A week later, a very pleased Merrill responds, and I quote, "The expedition has been successful and we may expect seeds in the not too distant future. If there be a sufficient number, I shall distribute to Edinburgh, Kew, and selected institutions in the West Coast, including the Save the Redwoods League." I'll just step back here and say, The picture on the left, those are cones which have not ripened or have not dried up and opened. And on the right, you see the Metasequoia cones. And these I picked up just several days ago. These ones have dried and they have opened, and the little seeds are coming out. In early January 1948, Hu reports that, and I quote, "Fortunately, the expedition to collect seeds of Metasequoia has been successfully concluded. The first discoverer," and here Hu means the collector of a sufficient quantity of the specimens, and I go back to the quote, "of this new tree is Mr. C.Y. Hu, a junior staff member of the Central Institute of Forest Research. This time, the seeds were collected by one of the graduate students of Professor Cheng from both the type tree and a tree of Lushan in Hubei province. Professor Cheng wrote that the large package of seed will be sent to you via a graduate student, and a small package will be sent to you via mail directly," and I end quote. Later that month, Merrill writes, quote, "I received the first shipment of Metasequoia seeds on the January 5th. A larger lot is expected through a graduate student en route to the United States either late this month or in February," end quote. Hu sent more Metasequoia seed collected in Lushan by airmail in mid-February with the instructions to distribute them to large nursery companies. He had hoped to interest those companies in contributing to further field work. $250 of the 1,000 sent by Merrill had been used for field collections. By early 1948, the seeds had all been received, and Arnold Arboretum staff sprang into action, preparing and sending packets to various institutions and nurseries. Metasequoia was on its way to the world. Now, Merrill had retired from the directorship of the Arnold in 1946 and became professor emeritus in 1948. He was no longer in a management position at Harvard University, and his ability to aid Hu sadly had ceased. Through 1948, his correspondence with Hu lessened as Merrill began his retirement. Reorganizations in China due to the Communist Revolution in 1949 further disrupted their communication, and sadly, a 25-year correspondence ceased. Hu and Merrill's decades-long support of each other's academic missions was exemplary. Both men worked collegially to advance their personal scholarship as well as that of their institutions, despite laboring a world away from each other. And that was in an age where communications were not instantaneous as they are today. In fact, I feel honored to be on this particular symposium today with my colleagues in China. We should all take a lesson from their dedication and perseverance in the collaborative pursuit of botanical knowledge. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. And to all of you who know this wonderful tree, it is really something that has been gracing our grounds since the 1950s. Obviously, we received the seeds in the 1940s, but they did not go out onto the grounds of the Arnold Arboretum, but they are magnificent trees. What I'd like to do now is give a little bit of a sense of the history of the Arnold Arboretum and its relationship with China. As was mentioned earlier, the Arnold Arboretum was really the first part of Harvard University to deeply engage with China, both through education and through a deep interest in the biodiversity of China. And I would like to give a short presentation on this. For those of you who don't know me personally, I am the director of the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University, and I'm also the Arnold Professor of Organismic and Evolutionary Biology at Harvard University. So let me share my screen, and hopefully this will all go all right. And let's see what I can do here. How does that look to everybody? Okay, great. Well, the simplest way to put it is that the Arnold Arboretum and all of us who work at the Arnold Arboretum are deeply, deeply in love with the trees of China. And there are important reasons for this. China is one of the great biodiversity hotspots of the world in terms of temperate trees, as well as subtropical and tropical trees. And so when you are interested in trees, you head to where the most of them are. Let me just step back and ask, who are we at the Arnold Arboretum? Well, to begin with, we are plants, we are a landscape, and we are people, not just an institution. We are Harvard's Museum of Trees. We are home to magnificent organisms like this dawn redwood you see at the Arnold Arboretum that came to us in 1948 as a seed and still grows on our grounds. We are home to magnificent collections. We are taxonomically arranged, and so each time you go to a part of our beautiful grounds, you can find a type of tree that will be seen in abundance. All of the blue dots there are our crab apples, many of which are incredibly important to scholars in China and around the world. And if you go to these dots that you see on our map in the spring, this is what you will see: a beautiful collection of flowering crab apples. And of course, we are home to a magnificent landscape. The designer of our landscape and grounds was the very same person who designed Central Park in New York City. We are host to the vibrant human diversity of Boston and beyond. Over 1 million visitors come to see the Arnold Arboretum each and every year. And as part of Harvard, we are a key research institution studying everything from global change, including climate change, to genomics. The trees that we grow here are both beautiful and important, but they are also trees that work to help us understand biodiversity and a changing world. And you can see this every day with graduate students and scholars from around the world who are using our trees to understand the effects of climate change. We are also an institution that is committed to helping the world preserve plant species that are under threat. We are a force for conservation and fighting extinction around the world. We don't just work in this part of Boston or New England or in America. We work around the world with our colleagues. For example, in China, with the beautiful paperbark maple that you see pictured here, and Michael Dosman, the keeper of the living collections, working with our colleagues in China to make sure that this species will be safe in the future. We are friends and colleagues with the peoples and the cultures of the world. The Arnold Arboretum is at its heart an international institution. We have been doing this for a very long time. On the left, you can see one of our first major expeditions to collect plants in China from 1907 to 1909 with Ernest Henry Wilson. But we also welcome our colleagues from China to America. And here you can see us in 2019 in the southeastern United States, welcoming colleagues from China to collect the plants, the seeds of North American species that can then return to scientific institutions and botanical gardens in China. And we are at heart a group of intrepid plant explorers. Nothing makes us happier than to get on a plane and fly to some other part of the world to be with our colleagues, for example, in Korea, in China, in Japan, in Europe, and to collect plants that we can bring back to tell the stories at the Arnold Arboretum. We've been doing this for a very long time. And if you visit the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University, you will see that more than 25% of our trees and shrubs that have been collected in the wild come from China. To many of my students, for example, in the class I teach on trees this fall, some of whom actually are from China, coming to the Arnold Arboretum is a bit like coming home. Because if you go to Chinese Path and you see all the flags that I've turned on of our specimens, you will discover that you are walking through the biodiversity of China. So how did we get to a point where we would have so many plants from China? Well, it begins in 1903 with our first director, Charles Sprague Sargent, in his journey around the world, who touched down in China. And in 1905, John Jack, whom we've heard was an incredibly important mentor to Dr. Hu, and then that wonderful expedition in 1907 to 1909. It's important to note that each of our plant explorers who went to China or other parts of the world went with a camera. And here you can see some of our archival images that John Jack returned with from 1905 in China. And some of the images that you can see, many, many images of Ernest Henry Wilson's expedition from 1907 to 1909. On the left near Songpan, I've been very near that spot. The building no longer exists. There were additional expeditions in 1909 to 1912, 1910 and 1911. Wilson went back, and Joseph Rock, 1924 to 1927. Expeditions continued in 1930s, and of course, with the incredibly important collection of dawn redwood seeds in the fall of 1947. Those seeds actually arrived at the Arnold Arboretum at Harvard University in Boston in 1948. And while there was a period of quiescence, it is important to note that one of our most important scholars, along with Dr. Hu, Hsien-Hsu, continued to correspond and to promote the botanical exchanges. Now, you've heard about Dr. Hu and his receiving 100 years ago his Doctor of Science from Harvard University, working at the Arnold Arboretum. You have heard of his incredibly important institution building in China for the modern structure of Chinese botany. For example, the Fan Memorial Institute of Biology, which became the Institute of Botany at the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing. The first botanical garden, Lushan Arboretum and Botanical Garden, and of course his important role in describing scientifically the dawn redwood. You've seen this title page of his dissertation, which was focused on the Chinese genera of seed plants, an incredibly important way of getting scientific knowledge of the plant biodiversity of China's incredibly rich biodiversity to the world. And I want you to hear and read of his dedication, of his incredible time here at the Arnold Arboretum. But the great debt of gratitude of the author is due to his teacher, Professor J.G. Jack of Harvard University, whose unfailing interest and invaluable suggestions and criticisms are the main source of the author's accomplishment. His bountiful kindness cannot be equaled. This is born of a love and respect for different cultures, but a unified love of plants and their diversity and evolution. I also want to mention Professor Hsien-Hsu, who worked for the Arnold Arboretum for many, many decades, and who was only the second Chinese woman to receive her PhD in botany from Harvard. She was an expert on hollies and so many other plants, and collected and identified almost 200,000 plant specimens, and was a mentor to so many students from China and around the world. And in fact, for those of you who are young and in attendance of this talk, we actually have a wonderful award that allows Chinese young scholars to come to the Arnold Arboretum, and this is to honor Dr. Hu, who lived a very rich life, lived to be over 100 years old. For those of you who have not been to Shenzhen and to the Fairy Lake Botanical Garden, I encourage you to go. I went there almost a decade ago as part of my wonderful journey through the many institutions of botany in China. And I was brought to this small place, very quiet, with these statues, these busts of the greatest botanists of the 20th century in China. There are 9 of them. Let me show you one of them. This is Professor Hu, and you can see both in Chinese and in English that he got his doctorate at Harvard University. And this is me posing with my good friend, Dr. Hu, in 2012. But he was not the only part of our journey of the Arnold Arboretum and its interactions and importance in China in terms of botany and plant biodiversity. Here we see Cheng Wanjun, who also got his graduate degree from Harvard and was a very important a forester and a botanist in China for many decades. And then of the 9, the third one who went to Harvard and received education in taxonomy, ecology, and physiology. And then as I went to the next statue, I saw Cheng Yang, the fourth. So of the 9 statues in this beautiful space that is for the founding members of the modern botanical world in China, 4 of them came to Harvard because they knew Harvard was a place that honored and respected China and its biodiversity. After China reopened to the West, you can imagine how eager we were at Harvard to go and visit again. And in 1980, the first Sino-American botanical expedition was mounted to Western Hubei province. In 1984, we returned again to Yunnan province, and in 1986 to Guizhou province. In 1989, Zhejiang province. In 1994, Hubei. In 1997, Chengbaishan. We were so excited to return in 2002, in 2003, in 2010, in 2015, again around the conservation of the paperbark maple. And then an expedition in 2015 to Sichuan that Michael Dosen and I participated in 2016, again to Sichuan. And there you see our good friend and colleague, Kang Wang. And here we are in Longqi National Forest Park in 2015, actually collecting the magnificent fruits of the Chinese dove tree, one of the most beautiful trees that graces our grounds. And in 2016, an expedition to Huanglong Nature Reserve in northern Sichuan. With all of our friends, we never go to China alone. We only go with our colleagues and friends from China who help us and lead us with their botanical knowledge and expertise so that we can collect and share the knowledge and the beauty of the biodiversity of China with the world here in Boston. And in 2017 and in 2018, and here we are with our friends again in 2019 for 3 weeks in North America and the southeastern United States, fighting off all the bugs and collecting plants that will now return and have returned to China to be studied by our colleagues in Chengdu, in Zhejiang, in Beijing, and other places. We continue to host our friends at Zhejiang University as they bring students to the Harvard Arnold Arboretum. We just hosted them again this year. In 2018, we signed an agreement to cooperate and train between the Chinese Union of Botanical Gardens and the Arnold Arboretum. And we have a 5-year agreement right now that is exciting that you will hear more about, that is based on a gift that was made to the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University, a very generous gift to promote greater interactions between us, the Beijing Botanical Garden, Kunming Institute of Botany, and Zhejiang University. And this is to foster a relationship for plant conservation, to document wild populations and inform conservation efforts, and to safeguard endangered species in botanical garden collections in China and the United States, and of course, to exchange staff. I finally want to conclude by mentioning one very important thing that I think many of you will enjoy. For over 25 years, a colleague of ours at Chengdu, at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Biological Sciences, has been using our images that were taken by our plant explorers in the early 20th century to re-photograph the very places. And this is a book that has been published and now a second edition, which shows on the left a picture taken by one of our collectors in the early 20th century and Professor Yin Kai-Pu's re-photography of the very same place 100 years later, such as this beautiful photograph on the left of Jinan Town in Sichuan, and 100 years later, the very same place, as you can see from the beautiful overlapping design of the mountains, or of cultural objects like Qinyang Temple in Sichuan, or of this beautiful bridge that after the earthquake in 2008 was partially destroyed, but still stands. And for all of you who would like to explore more of our beautiful history in China and over 2,000 pictures of its plants, its landscapes, its cultural objects, and its people, please scan the QR code that I am showing you right now on your phone. This will lead you directly to our archives that are free and available to anyone in the world. I end by saying that while China and America may have and speak different languages, and we may be separated by 8,000 miles, we are unified by one love of plants. Thank you to all of you in China who have been our supporters, our friends, and our colleagues. I encourage all of us to continue this journey for many hundreds of years to come. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Michael Dosman, the keeper of the living collections of the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University, to talk about our current and ongoing collaborations between us and so many of our good friends and colleagues in China. Michael?
Great. Thank you so much, Ned. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Hu Hsen-Hsu's receipt of his doctorate. Well, what I'd like to do is step through the next 10 minutes a little bit about what are we doing now in our current collaborations here at Harvard's Tree Museum. Just for context, we have over 16,000 objects in our museum, trees, shrubs, and vines from around the world. There's a lot of diversity there when you think of a temperate. We're not subtropical or tropical, but we have, it's a temperate collection. Everything has to live outdoors. And we have over 2,000 different species. And what's astonishing is that over half of these species were collected from someplace in the wild. And you saw this slide a little bit earlier from Ned. 25% of those plants that were collected in the wild came from China. The rest came from another, 52 different countries. But it's astonishing that a quarter of our plants come from China. And when I look at those plants growing out here in this landscape designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, we can see each of those dots on that map represents around 2,000 individual plants that have a story, a backstory from China. And when I look back, I know I'm talking about current collaborations, but it's all about the collaboration. Most of these plants that we have growing out there are from that modern era. Ned showed images from the 1980s, particularly the 1980 SABE. You can see a big spike. But if you turn back over a century, we have plants that are over a century old. In fact, our oldest living plant was collected in 1882. And it's a type of ash tree. It's a shrubby ash tree that was collected just outside of Beijing by Brett Schneider and sent to us. And what I think about is that on my first expedition for the Arnold Arboretum in 2010, a NACPEC, North America China Plant Exploration Consortium, I was joined by Tony Aiello, then of the University of Pennsylvania's Arboretum at Morris Arboretum, and then Wang Kong from the now National Botanical Garden. And there we were on Baiwashan, outside of Beijing, collecting that exact same species of ash. And it's always done together. When I look back over the entire living collections, over 5,000 different accessions, around half of those were collected Harvard University scientists collaborating with friends in China, and the other half were sometimes sent by our colleagues in China, and we didn't participate. But we've always built these collections in collaboration. And so 10 years ago, wow, it's a decade, we launched the Campaign for the Living Collections, an ambitious goal to collect and add 400 species of trees, shrubs, and vines from around the world. There's a list of them, and this is where they grow. You can see the floras of Eastern Asia and Eastern North America are very well represented. That was the first step. What are they and where are they found? The next step, though, was to develop and strengthen these partnerships, with botanists, with faculty, botanical garden staff, and of course, local experts who know the local floras. Here's a photograph, a colleague, Andrew Kopinski, had photographed of our expedition in 2017 outside of Pingwu. And there you can see Wang Kong in the red. And then you can also see Mr. Li, Hai-Cheng Li, who was a graduate student of Professor Gauss, who was along on our expedition, and then Jonathan Shaw from Harvard Magazine. Here we are a decade later, and the campaign for the living collections, and you can see each of those dots on a map are where the plants have been collected. And what's astonishing, and this map or this photo image is a little out of date now because of the current collecting season, but there have been almost 260 individual collectors from around the world who have collaborated with us to collect these plants and share them with the Arnold Arboretum, who we can in turn share them with scholars and other lovers of plants from around the world. It's always been about that collaboration. Here we have the North America China Plant Exploration Consortium. There are 9 North American and Chinese botanical gardens that work together to study the flora of China particularly. And we also formed, Ned alluded to, this collaboration, the China Conservation Collaboration, with the Arnold Arboretum and then 3 principal institutions within China. Of course, we have Zhejiang University with Professor Li Pan, and we can see Wang Kong at the China National Botanical Garden, and Deng Tao of the Kunming Institute of Botany. And this has been rewarding in so many different ways. We've had these staff exchanges, we've had field trips. In 2024, Miles Schwartz-Sachs, our assistant curator, and I traveled to Zhejiang University, where we met with students, met with faculty, went on a wonderful field trip throughout Zhejiang province, a little bit in Anhui, also touring the Hangzhou Botanical Garden, an incredible exchange. Later that year, several faculty from Zhejiang University, Yunpeng, who's now the provost at Yunpeng, is the provost now at Zhejiang, joined us he's a world's expert on ginkgo. He, Li Pan, and a former graduate student, Chi, we were there in our world famous ginkgo collection here at the Arnold Arboretum, brainstorming about research ideas, moving into the future, new collaborations to study the famous ginkgo tree. We also, this past May, were in China for a field trip with NACPEC, and this was a collaboration with the NACPEC institutions, Zhejiang University, Kunming Institute of Botany, and we were exploring throughout Hubei, Shanxi, Zhejiang. It was an outstanding field trip to really think about exploring the flora of China. And then later on this summer, there is the Zhejiang field course where students, about 12.5 students, undergraduate students from Zhejiang University, one from Beijing Forestry School, joined us for about a week, touring the landscapes of New England, mountains to the coast, to study plant biology and ecology, and a great exchange where we can teach and share our knowledge. And so I think when what I've come away with learning is, especially after this wonderful symposium, is just how important the collaborations are. All of our work, successful plant conservation efforts, our exploration efforts, research activities, teaching, they're never solitary endeavors. As Ned said, we all share a love of plants, and through that we have these strong bonds. And these are bonds that I can think of Professor John G. Jack and Hu Hsen-Hsu, the strong bonds that they shared together as people and studying the plants and a lifelong relationship. So I want to thank you all for this, and I'll start sharing my screen and turn it back over to Ned.
Thank you, Michael. It was wonderful to hear just a very quick sketch of the so many interactions that are ongoing and robust that are between the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University and our many friends and colleagues in China. I want to thank everyone who has made time for us in the evening in China and in the morning here in the United States and America and around the world for joining us in this celebration of the life of Dr. Hu, someone who has had extraordinary impact in both the United States and in China, really in the world, a citizen of the world who made a difference. And I think an inspiration to all of us in terms of how we should think about our own lives and how we can make the world a better and more interactive place. If you'd like to learn more about Dr. Hu and many of his other contributions, I want you to know that we have just at the Arnold Arboretum added a website page, a web page about his biography, listing a dozen or so of the most important figures in the Arboretum's history. Of course, Dr. Hu is one of them. And this link will be provided in the chat, which you can now see has just popped up. And I want to also tell you that several of our distinguished guests have been kind enough to make video tributes to Dr. Hu and his legacy. They've just come in the last few days, and in the next several days, we will send links to these videos to all of the registered participants in today's events. With that, I want to thank my colleagues who prepared and took so much time to make this an extraordinarily wonderful, indeed beautiful celebration of the life of one of the greatest members of the Arnold Arboretum community and of the basic foundational structure of Chinese botany in the 20th and 21st century, Dr. Hu. Thank you all. To those of you in China, good night. To those of you in America, good morning. Goodbye.
谢谢所有朋友的支持，Thank you。
谢谢大家，Thank you。